Hello and welcome again to another edition of FS 131 Lectures. This week we're on Module 5 and we look at factors affecting sensory measurement. This will be divided into three sub-modules: individual differences, biases and errors, and personality and attitude. So before, we've looked at the factors that are things you could control. However, these are the factors that you could only control to a limited extent and are highly variable depending on the panelist. First, we have individual differences. Most notably would be gender, or for those who are politically correct among you, sex assigned at birth. So the chromosomes that we have statistically dictate to a certain extent the level of skills that we have. Even though, for example, I am a super taster, my wife, who is not even a food technologist, could normally detect things that I would overlook in the taste and aroma of food. So, of course, we're about the same age and we eat pretty much the same thing, so it's not really a matter of exposure. Women generally also tend to have a more highly developed language skill or vocabulary set. So just the simple matter of colors, right? They could name more colors than men. Okay, I can't even differentiate lavender and lilac. If you ask me what something that looked purplish pink is like. And the measurements, judgments made by female assessors, particularly in relation to flavor and odor properties, are also on the downside shown to be more inconsistent. So it's not all positive because hormonal imbalances do affect the perception and therefore their response to a certain stimulus. Of course, for the sake of equality, this should be considered, but not for, let's say, employment. I know of a sensory evaluation firm who only employs female flavorists, and of course, in a sense, that would be somewhat discriminatory. However, I don't know to what extent they've rationalized why they want an all-female staff team. Of course, in terms of age, the senses would increase as you grow older, um, perhaps through experience and exposure. And some senses actually, of course, like hearing, as we've seen in the previous um, lecture on senses, does decrease towards the twilight years of a person. And perhaps the same could be said about eyesight, as we have seen more as people get really, really old, they start to wear eyeglasses and develop all kinds of problems in their eyes. And of course, when we are testing young children and babies, they usually, to a certain extent, react more to certain odors or flavors. If they hate something, they'd let you know. Alright, in terms of physiological state, the reason why we have such guidelines, especially for trained panelists or analytical sensory test panelists, to not be too hungry before taking a sensory test or to avoid testing if you have an illness, is because the physiological state or your mood affects how you are influenced by tastes and odors or how acceptable you find things to be. So if you were pretty hungry and you were shown a burger, for example, that would normally just be something that you'd rate at a 7 out of 9, you'd probably rate it with an 8 instead. So genetics has been proven to affect taster status. So for example, sensitivity to certain compounds like PTC or PROP, which is related to determining whether or not you're a super taster, varies among not just gender as you've seen or biological sex, but also with race. As we know, races have similar genetic traits, and one of that, of course, is related to taste perception. For example, in Filipinos, they found a much higher percentage of super tasters or people sensitive to certain compounds versus studies conducted with, let's say, North American or Caucasian lineages. And as for psychological effects, we know that, among other things, your personality and mood affect how you make choices. So, a more impulsive person or a more emotionally unstable person, for example, might rate the same sample different today than tomorrow because maybe person woke up on the wrong side of the bed, just broke up with person he or she was in a relationship with, or simply had a bad day. So that's why there are experimental designs that account for testing the same sample, the person's response to the same sample on different testing dates or times. But generally, we don't need to do that in class because we don't have the luxury of conducting a test for more than one day.